sociological. These guys didn't either said nothing about Montessori or they didn't like her. So the progressives didn't like her. The people that didn't like the progressives don't like her. What is going on? Like, where does she fit in?
She doesn't.
And I think that there's a way that you can kind of schematize this. As there's knowledge, skills, and structure on the left, and agency and motivation and critical thinking and all these wonderful things, creativity on the right. And then there's a kind of trade-off here, where on the conventional classical approach to education, there's a real focus on the knowledge and the structure and the skills that you need. And on the progressive view of education, there's a real focus on agency and motivation. And Montessori doesn't fit into either of these groups. She's like somewhere in the middle. There's like a balance or an equilibrium here. I don't think that this is the right way to think about it. So when Montessori is writing, does she ever say, a single time ever, you have to balance the agency of the child against other factors? Like, she's super, super focused on the agency of the child, right? This is. I mean, she would consider herself to be kind of extreme in one direction. And she also thinks that, like, she is strict in how you use the materials, and she does come up with a very deliberate scope and sequence for math, and she does think that you should learn writing at a young age. Her strategy, when there are pedagogical problems, is, oh, I know why there's a pedagogical problem in teaching math and writing. It's because you're not doing it soon enough. Let's do it sooner. So it's not to, like, de-emphasize knowledge. It's to, like, how can we teach these children this stuff earlier? How can we teach them more earlier, and that'll solve all of these problems? That's kind of her default strategy. So I think what's needed here is, I think you need to break these axes apart. You need two axes. You need one axis that's knowledge, skills, structure, the things that conventional educators care about, and that they have good reason to care about. And then you have the things that progressive educators care about, agency and motivation. And those are two different axes. And I think that this is the right way of thinking about it. I think that the right way of thinking about it is conventional education is low on agency. There's a choice to de-emphasize agency so that you can get content and skills and knowledge. And in progressive education, there's a choice to de-emphasize content, knowledge, structure, skills in favor of agency. So the view is that, the implicit view that unites these two views is there is a trade-off. If you have more of this, you have less of this, and if you have less of this, then you have more of this. This view, I think that this is a common framework. This is a common way of thinking about it. This is like an underlying meta-level framework as to how you think about this question. Do you think that the more agency you have, the less knowledge and skills and structure there will be? Like, if I tell the child that they have to use the red rods for learning numbers, like, they're not going to be as creative. And do you think that the more creativity they have, the less there's going to be knowledge and skills and structure? If I let the children do whatever they want, they might not care about Roman history. Right? There's a trade-off here, and you have to find a balance. And a lot of educators think about this way. I do not think that this is how Montessori thinks about it. I think that she thinks you need a maximal amount of both. Knowledge, skills, and structure. You need very specific limits, not the same limits and structure that everybody thinks that you need, but a very specific sort of limit, and you need to optimize for these limits for the agency of the child in a certain way. So this move, where you kind of break things apart and you say, can't we have both? There's not actually a trade-off here. If you think about it the right way, there's not a trade-off. I know it seems like there's a trade-off, but there's not a trade-off. I think you see something very similar. I think that this will probably look familiar to you guys in like parenting. So you see, there's a way of thinking about parenting where it's like you can either be supportive and understanding and empathic, or you can have structure and set expectations and build discipline. And the more you do of one, the less you do of the other. And if you do too much, if you go too much in this direction, you're like, if you go way too far in this direction, you're like negligent. But if you go too far in this direction, you're just a permissive parent. You don't say no to your child. You don't give them structure. You don't set expectations. They kind of run over you. And if you go too far in this direction, you're authoritarian. You are shutting your child down. You are kind of imposing too much on your child in a way that's unhealthy for them. And so you need a sort of balance. You need a sort of balance between these two. You need to find a happy medium. And the way that people, I mean, this is not me. The way that people think about this is, no, this is actually two dimensions. It is not the case that there is a trade-off between support and understanding and structure and expectations. You can be high on support and high on structure. So these are two different dimensions. The negligent parent is low on both. And the authoritarian and the permissive parents are high on one and low on the other, but it is possible to be both kind and firm. To have both high expectations and to be very empathic and understanding. And that is what good parenting looks like. That's what good classroom management looks like. You have to understand it differently. You have to reject the trade-off. They have to be two things that seem incompatible, and you have to think about them in a certain way so that they become one thing. They become compatible. So I think that that's the right way to think about this. But this is, as far as I know, this is a novel point. So Montessori doesn't write this way. I mean, this is a point that's kind of been batted around a lot within higher ground culture, within our kind of thinking, and that we've made in a lot of different contexts. But almost everybody puts Montessori in a progressive bucket. So this is a different way of thinking about it. I think this is, part of what's motivating this is I think that this is how Montessori would think about herself if presented with this framework. But this is not coming from her. What goes in here, by the way? What's the equivalent of negligent parenting?
Free range.
Free range, no
Free
school, maybe. Maybe that's some of it. That is, I think that's one version of it. A certain kind of, I mean, free range.
Well, I guess that's
Yeah,
agency.
yeah, that's agency. That's also more on the parenting side. What was the? I heard some comments over here.
Oh, well, Joanna was talking about the boy who went to the treehouse
Treehouse school. It's like
What is a treehouse school?
they climb trees and run in a field all day.
That sounds like it's on the progressive side, but I'm not sure. Yeah. Yeah, I think that this is, there's different versions of this, but at a first pass, this is kind of like failing public schools. Failing public schools are, they have the worst of both worlds. So it's like, no, there's specific content that you need to learn, but they don't kind of give you the structures that are actually going to enable. It's like crappy standards that don't make any sense or have any meaning, and no motivation to achieve them. So you can there are different kinds of ways for schools to fail. In Aristotelianism is there's 1,000 ways to go wrong and only one way to hit the target. So there's a lot of different ways that schools go wrong, but this is a real category, just like negligent parenting is a real category, I think.